Joining us, MS Now contributor, managing editor of The Bulwark, Sam Stein, MS Now political analyst and former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, Rick Stengel, and co-founder and director of economic policy at Veda Partners, Henrietta Trace. Henrietta, let's talk about credit cards. What are credit cards?
Let's start with cards. The way to think about this, I think that's the easiest to understand, is that the average family spends $310 a week on groceries. That's how much more it now costs you to fill up your truck or your car. That's because of the war. So now you're out a whole week's worth of groceries, and that's why people are turning to credit cards. Savings rates are at 3-year lows. People are the most negative and pessimistic about their job prospects, their independent economic viability, as they have been since World War II. So people going to get credit cards is an indicator of a very anxious nation that's run through all of its savings and does not have the money it's costing to get through this war. And this is not a one-time event. This is every single week. Every time that you go to fill up, every time you go to get groceries, and it will continue to cascade. If you go to the doctor's office, your medical imaging costs more. If you need to get a new phone, the semiconductors cost more. All the fertilizer that are growing your food costs more. Every single piece of this continues to compound. And I think more problematic is the White House now signaling that they want to pass a gas tax suspension, which means they think prices are going to rise from here. Those are one-time off bets, and it's compounding.
Well, explain how the gas tax suspension is going to work.
So we have an 18.4. Yeah, we have an 18.4 cent gas tax, 24.4 cents for diesel. And the idea is you suspend the gas tax for maybe 90 days. That's what a couple of states around the country have done, Kentucky, Georgia, and a few others. And the idea is that you get that 18 cents shaved off the top of your gas. So if you're buying gas at $4.55, 56 cents, this will save you 18 cents on every gallon. That's for 90 days. So first, right off the bat, I know that that means that I think the straight and gas prices are going to be high for another 90 days. And the idea is that this is a one-time thing, but it's going to raid all of the Highway Trust Fund, all the potholes and bridges and road repairs that we see. It's a huge compounding problem. It's very expensive, about $176 billion, if I'm not mistaken. And those are the figures that we're going to be dealing with. So the president is lending some support to this idea now, but there's a very long way to go. And again, it's 18 cents.
Oh, he needs Congress to get on board with it as well. I know I quoted Kevin Hassett. Let me just play Kevin Hassett. I think it's worth listening to him talk about it directly.
The consumer is really firing on all cylinders, just like the corporate sector you're seeing in the earnings reports. And they're doing that because they have so much more money in their pockets. In fact, I had the head of one of the big 5 banks in my office yesterday going through the credit card data. And just as Secretary Bessent said, credit card spending is through the roof. They're spending more on gasoline, but they're spending more on everything else, too.
Sam, it reminds me of the Scott Bessent line where he was talking about buying your 10th, 12th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th home. What's up with this White House?
A little tone deaf, to say the least. I thought I would rank the Bessent one a little bit even more tone deaf. Shaving off that 11th home as a way to, prepare for the costs going up is something that only a select few of us can consider. But Kevin Hassett, he does this time and again. He goes out there on TV and he paints this incredibly rosy but also incredibly detached picture of where the economy is. And he does it because he knows that someone is watching him on TV, and that person is Donald Trump. And yes, credit card spending is going up, but as we've just outlined, it's going up for the wrong reasons. Gas is more expensive. Cost of goods is more expensive. People have to pay for essential services, and so they're putting it on credit. That is not a sign of a healthy economy. It's a sign of an economy that is coming apart at the seams. And if, in fact, gas prices are not going to go down anytime soon, you can imagine that inflation is likely to get even worse because it is compounding. It goes into all these transportation costs. It goes into costs for a number of other goods as well. And so we are looking at a summer in which people are naturally going to be going on the road. People are going to be cooking out. You can see right there, ground beef. And the administration is looking for ways to chip at it. So there's two things that are happening here. One is they're painting an incredibly rosy picture with these types of cable news hits. And then secondarily is they're trying to find little ways to chip at the cost. So the gas tax holiday is one of them. But the other thing that's kind of an interesting tell is that Trump is considering getting rid of some of the tariffs on beef, which is an admission we should note that the tariffs were, in fact, responsible for raising prices in the first place. So they're nipping around the edges, and we'll see if it does any good. I think in the aggregate, it's only going to be a little bit of relief, and the bigger picture problems will persist.
Rick, why nip around the edges? Why not just roll back all the tariffs?
Well, you know, the truth is every president inherits his economy from his predecessor. The economy that Trump inherited was an economy where inflation was going down, GDP was going up. If he had just decided to, I'm just going to start taking credit for this a few months in, it would have looked good. What did he do? He shot himself in the foot with tariffs. He had major kind of terrible move in invading Iran, increasing oil prices, which has a multiplier effect on everything else. So he has single-handedly kind of destroyed a positive economy that he inherited, that he could have just actually, taken credit for, and people would have been pretty happy. It's not a good situation. I mean, the other thing we didn't mention is that the national debt now is as high as it's been ever as a percentage of GDP since World War II, which is it's 100% of GDP, over multiple $1 trillion. So that also has an inflationary effect. All of these things have inflationary effects. And listening to, that cabinet member, it's like, did you take Economics 101? Credit card debt has an inflationary effect on every other aspect of the economy.
Yeah, and the APR on credit cards is exorbitant. So if you miss one payment, you're paying a lot more for your bag of oranges than you would have been paying if you just were able to use your debit card or your ground beef. Sam, I thought Republicans were the ones that wanted to get a handle on the national debt.
Well, they do when there's a Democratic president, and that's time and time again what we see. So I was around during the Tea Party wave 2010. This was the rallying cry. And then subsequently they get into office, and during the Trump administration, debt went up. They don't cut back on spending. They do cut taxes. Those in combination drive up the debt. And look, I mean, there will be cuts here and there that they will propose. And I will give, I guess, if you're monomaniacally focused on that, you can say, well, they're cutting back on food stamps and Medicaid and all the things. But they did just embrace a $1.5 trillion defense budget, which is an exorbitant amount of money, greater than, I think it was like something like the next 8 countries combined in terms of their defense budget. So, it's selective spending cuts, constant call for tax cuts. And so the calls for deficit reduction and debt reduction are pretty much basically when a Democrat is president.
Where does this money come from?
Well, and by the way, if you're letting go of taxes on gasoline, on beef, you're getting less money
so
from
where
taxes.
does the money come from?
Well, part of it is why the debt is at a higher level than it's ever been. I mean, the deficit that Trump is creating is going to be the highest deficit of any president ever. It's deficit spending. You're not getting the tax revenue. You're spending more than you're taking in. They're spending $1.50 for every dollar they're taking in.